Welcome to this lightning lecture. My name is Chris van Wyk, and in this session we are going to look at adding material design to Xamarin.Forms 2 applications. Since part of the process involves designing and/or theming changes, we'll also look at the Xamarin.Android designer support for material design in our latest Xamarin 4 release. With the release of Android 5, also known as Lollipop, came an announcement of Google's new design language, Material Design. Since then, a lot has been written on the topic. However, before we dive into themes, styles, and code, I would like to cover a bit of background around material design and the material theme. We are going to have a brief look at what material design is, what the material theme is, and how this affects the AppCompat support libraries, and how we take this concept and implementation into Xamarin.Forms. Lastly, we'll look at the Xamarin.Android designer support introduced in the latest Xamarin 4 release to support material design. Let us start by looking at material design and what it is. At Google I/O 2014, we heard a bold statement from Android. Mobile is over. We need to start designing for people. If you sit down and read the material design documentation, you will find the following statements. Material is a metaphor. It is the unifying theory of a rationalized space and a system of motion. The material is grounded in tactile reality, inspired by the study of paper and ink, yet technologically advanced and open to the imagination and magic. Material design is bold, graphic, intentional. The foundational elements of print-based design, typography, grids, space, scale, color, and use of imagery guide visual treatments. These elements do far more than please the eye. They create hierarchy, meaning, and focus. Deliberate color choices, edge-to-edge imagery, large-scale typography, and intentional white space create a bold and graphic interface that immerses the user in experience. You will also see that motion provides meaning. Motion respects and reinforces the user as the prime mover. The primary user actions are inflection points that initiate motion, transforming the whole design. All action takes place in a single environment. Objects are presented to the user without breaking the continuity of experience, even as they transform and reorganize. Motion is meaningful and appropriate, serving to focus attention and maintain continuity. Feedback is subtle yet clear. Transitions are efficient yet coherent. Yet, after hearing these statements, I would understand if you are still a bit puzzled over what this all means. Let's see if we can break it down into a few concepts that will help clear up the definition of material design. The first key concept is that the material environment is a 3D space, which means all objects have X, Y, and Z dimensions. The second concept that we have is in order to portray the sense of a 3D world, your design is going to make use of light and shadow. Each design element is now identifiable as an item which relies on near physical properties, having a uniform thickness but varying X and Y dimensions. Content is displayed on material but does not add thickness. Multiple elements cannot occupy the same point in space, nor can it pass through each other. Material can also be transformed. Material can change shape. Material grows and shrinks only along its plane, and material never bends or folds. Sheets of material can join together to become a single sheet of material. We also see that material can be spontaneously generated or destroyed anywhere in the environment. The sense of movement, transformation, and physical properties is achieved with a combination of elevation and shadows, showing activity and directional movement. By bringing these concepts together, we achieve a UI design that hints at interaction and rich content, keeping our users immersed and engaged in our applications. So based on what we've seen so far, material design is more than a theme, style, or even a control set. It is literally a design language, and I highly recommend the link here on the slide if you would like to find out more about this topic. So let's move on. We now sort of have an idea of what material design is. Let's see how we can enable this as part of our application. Material theme is a user interface style that determines the look and feel of views and activities in Android 5 or Lollipop. As with material design, material theme is built into Android 5, and it is used by the system UI as well as applications or activities opting into the material design appearance. Material theme is not a theme in the sense of a system-wide appearance option that a user can dynamically choose from a settings menu. Rather, material theme can be thought of as a set of related built-in base styles that you can use to customize the look and feel of your application. Android 5 provides 3 material theme flavors, and these are the options that you're going to implement in your application to enable material design ultimately. The options we have available is the first here on the left hand side, which is theme material. This is the dark version of material theme and the default flavor inside Android 5. The second option is theme material light, and this is the light version of material theme. Our last option is the material light dark action bar, which is a light version of material theme but with a dark action bar enabled. Now this means that you can derive from one of these material themes to create your own theme overriding some or all of the color attributes. For example, you can create a theme that derives from theme material light but override the app bar color to match the color of your brand. You can use a single theme for an entire application, or you can use a different theme for different screens or activities in your app. In the above screenshots, for example, a single application uses a different theme for each activity to demonstrate the built-in color schemes. The radio buttons switches the application to different activities and as a result display different themes. One thing we need to keep in mind though is that because material theme is supported only on Android 5, you cannot use it or a custom theme derived from material theme to theme your application for running on earlier versions of Android. However, you can configure your application to use material theme on Android 5 devices and then gracefully fall back to an earlier theme when it runs on older versions of Android. When choosing to configure an application level theme, you set the Android theme attribute to enable a material theme flavor at application level. There are 2 ways of achieving this. Either via editing the Android manifest file directly, specifying the theme referencing the Android built-in style name or a custom derived style, or adding an assembly attribute to either the assembly information or properties CS files. When choosing to configure an activity level theme, you set the activity attribute theme property to enable a material theme flavor at activity level. Here you specify the theme, referencing the Android built-in style or a custom derived style. Keep in mind that this theme will now only be applicable to this activity or the screen in your application. You can enhance your brand by creating a custom theme that styles your application with your brand's colors. To create a custom theme, you define a new style that derives from a built-in material theme flavor, overriding the color attributes that you want to change. For example, you can define a custom theme that derives from theme material light dark action bar and then change the screen background color to beige instead of white. Material theme exposes the following layout attributes for customization. The first item here is the text color primary, and this is the color of a UI text in the application bar. Color primary is the color of the application bar, and color accent the color of UI controls such as checkboxes, radio buttons, and edit text boxes. On the right hand side we have status bar color, and this is the color of the status bar, followed by color primary dark, the color of the status bar, and contextual application bars. This is normally a dark version of color primary. The last 2 items here is window background, and this is the color of the screen background followed by navigation bar color, which is the color of the navigation bar. We're going to see a little bit later how to go about changing these values. For now, let's move on and talk about app compatibility. As you heard earlier, devices running versions of Android prior to Android 5 will not be able to implement Material Theme. However, you can configure your application to use Material Theme on Android 5 devices and then gracefully fall back to an earlier theme when it runs on older versions of Android. To achieve this graceful fallback, the Android support library packages contain several libraries that can be included in your application. Each of these libraries supports a specific range of Android platform versions and a set of features. Now, one of them is the version 7 AppCompat supported library. AppCompat, also known as Action Bar, started out as a backport of the Android 4 Action Bar API for devices running on Gingerbread, providing a common API layer on top of the backported implementation and framework implementation. The new version 21 AppCompat update provides the API and feature set that is up to date with Android 5 and includes an action bar, which provides an implementation of the action bar user interface pattern, followed by an AppCompat dialog, which adds a dialog class that can be used as a base class for an AppCompat theme dialog. It also includes the AppCompatActivity, which adds an application activity class that can be used as a base class for activities that uses the support library action bar implementation. And then lastly, the shared action provider, which adds a support for a standardized share action that can be included in an action bar. We are going to focus on the AppCompatActivity. This is what we're going to include in our activities to make sure that we can present a toolbar to our users. Keep in mind that this library depends on the version 4 support library, which means as soon as you're going to add the AppCompat NuGet package into your application, you will see that the support library is also going to be included. Android 5 introduced a new toolbar widget. This is a generalization of the action bar pattern, but gives you much more control and flexibility to use it. Toolbar is a view in your hierarchy, just like any other, making it easier to interleave with the rest of your views, animations, and react to scroll events. An application may choose to designate a toolbar as the action bar for an activity using the setActionBar method. Toolbar does support a more focused feature set than action bar. From start to end, a toolbar may contain a combination of the following optional elements. The first item is a navigation button. This may be an up arrow, navigation menu toggle, close, collapse, done, or any other icon of the application's choosing. The second item is a branded logo image, and this may extend to the height of the bar and can be any width. You also have the option to add a title and a subtitle. The title should be a signpost for the toolbar's current position in the navigation hierarchy and the content contained therein. The subtitle, if present, should indicate any extended information about the current content. If an app uses a logo image, it should strongly consider omitting a title and a subtitle. You can also add one or more custom views. The application may add arbitrary child views to the toolbar if so choose. The last item is an action menu. The menu of actions will be pinned to the end of the toolbar, offering a few frequent, important, or typical actions, along with an optional overflow menu for additional actions. We'll see a little bit later how to add a toolbar to our application. It is going to be a requirement as soon as we add navigation to our Xamarin.Forms apps. Up to this point, we have only had a look at what is needed to enable a traditional Xamarin.Android application to support material design. The default Xamarin.Forms activity has been the Forms application activity from which all Xamarin.Forms Android applications derive the activity class. Now, to support material design, you are going to change this base class from Forms application activity to FormsAppCompatActivity. I would now like to switch over to Xamarin Studio so that we can see what is needed to modify our Xamarin.Forms application to support material design. For our demonstration today, we're going to use Xamarin Studio. I'm going to create a Xamarin.Forms application, and once it's created, we're going to then update the NuGet packages to enable the material design components, as well as modify the application CS class so that we have a couple of controls to see how changes in the color palette affects our application. With our project now created, the first step is to update the Xamarin.Forms packages that we have inside the solution. Now I'm going to focus specifically here on Android. If we look at the packages, you'll notice that we currently, if we use the templating, we're going to sit on version 1.3.5, and we would like to update this to version 2.0. Notice also that by default we have support for Android version 4 support libraries. So let's update the solution and then see how the Android project specifically gets changed. Right, so our application has now been updated. A quick look at Android will show that a couple of new support libraries got added to our project. Let me expand that node. You'll see now we have design. We still have version 4 because version 7 AppCompat depends on it. We have an inclusion of card view as well as the media router. So the next step here, once we have this in place, is to start modifying our application to support material design. The first thing I'm going to do is to change this class file name. I'm going to change it back to app.cs. You may have also noticed, if we open up the file, that I've changed the standard template code that we have. Instead of just displaying welcome to Xamarin.Forms, I've decided to add into our application a button with a click event, then our stack layout with a couple of other items to it. We keep the text or the label that we add, but I've also added an entry as well as a switch. So the main idea here is to get something that sort of represents what we saw in the slides, to at least see when we set an accent color that actually changes our application as well. So let's have a look at what this app looks like, just to sort of get our bearings in terms of what we have here. I'm going to set Android as my starter project, and then I'll deploy this to my Lollipop emulator. Right, so there's our application. Pretty straightforward, what you'd expect from a Xamarin.Forms application without any customization. Right, so let's change a couple of things. We want to prepare this app now to be able to display a material theme based on the material design language that we talked about today. So I'm going to stop the application, and the first thing that I would like to do at this point is to add in to my app the layouts for a toolbar and a tab bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back here into the resources folder for the Android application. Then I'm going to add two files to the layouts folder. So both of these two files are going to be Android layout files. So the first one is going to be a toolbar layout file, and the second one is going to be a tabs layout file. Right, once we have these two files, we obviously need to change the actual XML layout. These are not two standard layout files. They're going to represent what our toolbar would look like, as well as the tab bar if we have one inside the application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch here to toolbar, change the source, and I'm going to change the source to the following. So this is the information that I have here. We set the toolbar ID. We're going to set the layout width to match the parent, the height, the wrapper content. We are going to set a color primary, so to highlight the same color as what we'll see from our color palette. And we're going to say, you know what, for this theme, I would like to be able to use the AppCompat dark action bar, and the pop-up theme is going to be the AppCompat light overlay theme. So that's our toolbar. Next item to fix is the actual tab bar. So the tab bar process is going to be exactly the same, though this time around we're going to style and set the properties so that we have a manageable tab bar. Now if I switch back to the designer, you'll see that we don't have a render layout for this, but it gives us an idea of what are on these files. Right, the next step is to now introduce the FormsAppCompatActivity. So to do this, I'm going to switch to my application CS class. Here we don't need to change anything, so I'm going to leave it as is, and then I'm going to switch to the main activity. So in our main activity, we're going to change this base class. So the base class we're going to choose is the FormsAppCompatActivity, and by doing this, we'll now be able to compile the application. But notice what happens when we run the application. Our application deploys, but as soon as it needs to run, we'll receive this illegal state exception. So the cause of this exception is that we are not implementing an app-compatible theme. So we'll need to fix this. The easiest way to fix this is to introduce the theme at an application level. So let's do that. To set the application-wide theme, we're going to need to edit our manifest file. So what we'll do is we're going to modify the application tag, and we are going to specify that we'll use a theme. So we're going to specify Android theme, and we're going to set this equal to one of the built-in styles. So the style that we're going to reference today is going to be the App Compatibility Light Dark Action Bar theme. So this will be theme app compat light dark action bar. So we should now be satisfying the requirement that we saw earlier. Let's see if this is actually the case. So it seems as if we're making a little bit of progress here, but we still have a problem. We still have an illegal state exception, but this time around it's because we have a window action bar that has been set to false. And the reason is we're now going to use a toolbar instead. So we need to fix this. Let's see how we can fix this. What we need to do here is we need to introduce the window action bar false tag in our theme. However, we cannot do this because we're making use of a built-in style. The only way to really achieve this is to now derive from that style or that theme and implement our own version of it. So what we'll do is in our values folder, we're going to add a new file. This is going to be an XML file, and I'm going to call this style. So style is going to be the override basically for what we have. Now to speed things up, I'm going to add resources to this file, and then we'll fix up the rest of this to make sure that we close all tags and that we have a properly formed XML file. Now a couple of things is happening inside this file. First off, we're setting up a theme that we'll be able to reference now from our application. Then we're going to base it off a base theme which has a parent which was our previously selected light dark action bar theme. We're going to set the window to no title and the window action bar to false. And the reason why we do this, at least for no title, is that since the application theme is not full screen, by definition, the status bar will go away, but not the title bar. So we'd like the title bar to not be visible. And then we'll satisfy that exception and make sure that the window action bar is set to false so that we can introduce the toolbar successfully. Speaking of which, we now need to modify a little bit more C# code to include the tabs and toolbar layouts inside our application. So let's do that. In our main activity, we're going to need to specify the toolbar and the tab bar resources. This is going to allow us to load these or inflate these resources when needed. So we'll start off with the toolbar resources, and we're going to set this equal to our resource that we've created a little bit earlier. So that'll be the layout file and then the toolbar layout file. The same is going to be done for the tab bar. So the tab layout resource is going to be from resource, layout, and then tabs. There's one more step that we need to complete, and that is to reference our custom theme. So our custom theme is this my theme that we've defined. So we'll head over back to the Android manifest file, and we're going to replace theme app compat light dark action bar with our own theme name, so my theme. Let's run the application to see if this now actually solves the problem that we had earlier. Right, so that seems to solve the problem. We have our application, we have a different theme, so that light theme actually took. With the release of Xamarin 4, we have brand new Xamarin.Android support for material design and material theme management. Our current requirement is to customize the custom-derived theme that we have. However, I'm going to look at both the design and theme management features in the designer. Before we jump back into the IDE, let us make sure we understand the changes we are going to make. The requirement is to modify the color palette values in order to support the material theme. What you have seen so far is that the style is intended to support backwards compatibility, at least the one that we've defined. The question now is, what if you want to support devices running Android 5 and up? For these devices, the value style XML file will be used. However, to make use of attributes specific to later API versions, you will create a values v21 folder with a style XML file to override these specific attributes. In order to prevent repetition, you are able to create a colors XML file specifying color declarations used across multiple styles, which is going to be the case in our example. So with this file in place, you reference the name value to make use of the specific color that is required. This means that your styles XML file will change to the following. Instead of hex colors, you're going to now reference those colors created in the colors XML file. The values v21 styles XML file will now contain attribute overrides specific to Android 5 or even overrides to the base style XML file if needed. Let us switch back to Xamarin Studio to see how we'll customize the theme. Right, we're now back here inside Xamarin Studio. And to show you the material design elements that we have, I'm going to add a new file to our application, something we can get rid of afterwards. So I'm going to select here from Android a layout file. I'm just going to call this sample. We don't need anything spectacular here in terms of file. We just need some kind of layout. Now the first item we're going to look at is the actual material design grid. So this is the button here on the right hand top. You'll notice there's a button and next to it there's going to be a drop down indicator. So I can pick that and it'll give me the specifications of the design grid that is currently enabled. Now what I'll do is if I toggle that button, it'll then enable the values that we have here. So you can see here that we have a grid, which are these blue squares, and I can manage it. I can say, you know what, I don't want to see the grid. I can turn it on and off. The next item we have is key lines, and we have left, top, right, and bottom. Now currently we have two left key lines, and we have none top or bottom. So for instance, if I would like to add a bottom item, I can do this. I can specify it, and I can add it, and it'll give me that key line to work with. There are also these spacing lines that are set up, so these green areas, and again I can manage it accordingly, left, top, right, and bottom. So this gives me the opportunity to observe the design language specifications for the controls that we lay out on the design. One thing to note, once you enable this and you start making modifications, the source will reflect the changes, and it shows up as this tools attribute. So everything we set up is specified in here. If I were to remove this, it will clean out the design grid that we see. So let's go back to the designer. I'm going to uncheck this. We don't want to see this currently in the UI. The next option we have is the material color palette. So the material color palette is actually a really awesome tool, and it shows up here on this button. So in here we actually have the theme editor. So I'm going to tap on that so you can see what it looks like. The material palette is the option that sits as one of these items we can select, and it allows me to select a color and then it will populate a hue set. So let's say I change this to blue or indigo. You will see these are the colors that I'll use as my material design colors, but then I also have hues I could apply. Now there's a couple of options that happens inside this theme editor, so let's quickly have a look at it. On the left hand side, I have the color palette options that I can now override. So for instance, the background, the primary color, the primary dark color. So if I were to set the primary color, I will first off see the inheritance that resolves this color that I see. And you can see here, this resolves to FF21, 21, 21. It's based on the primary material dark theme, then material gray 900, and then the ultimate item that we see that color. There's also a color picker, which will allow me to pick a color of my own choice. This will take me outside of the material design colors, but I can set hue, saturation, and the value. I can even select a red, green, blue color. We can set the opacity, and I can even specify a color name. You'll notice as I pick it, this block here will change to the color. So if I change this to, let's say, 20, we should see that color change show up, and you can see it gets applied immediately to our design. But yellow is not the color I need. So I'm going to go to Material Palette, and what I think I'll do is I'm going to focus here on indigo. So I'm going to change my primary color to, let's take blue. Let's change the primary color to 800. So blue 800. Now there's another option here, and that's resources. The resources will show me all the theme resource colors that is available currently. You need to watch out when you select any of the colors here. The reason for this is if I select a color and let's say the color activated highlight, and I said this is my primary color, it could potentially bleed into each other and I would not be able to see text on a button or a button on a view or anything like that. So just watch out when using this. Primarily for now, we want to stick with the material palette. So I've set the primary color. I'm going to now change the primary dark color. And again, I'm going to select here from the material palette and I'm going to select 900. So as I walk through this, you'll see that my UI updates, but this current theme has unsaved changes, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So let's just change the accent color as well, and I think, let's select something pinkish. I think that should work, and I'll set that to 500, and I'll do the same for the control activated value. So material color, let's select pink, and that's fine. Right, so now we have a couple of colors selected. We now need to save these changes. Notice that before I save this, notice that we have a default theme selected here. Right, so let me save. I'm going to create a new theme. That will create on the left hand side a theme XML file. If I open that theme XML file, you'll see that this overrides that device default theme, but it set the color primary dark, accent, and control activated. So exactly what we needed. But why did it not change the style that we have there? So let's see what's happening here. This custom theme would allow me to select the theme base here, right? But it's not going to render anything. So you may think that this is something that is not optimal, but we can fix this. So let's do this. I'm going to drop into the style here, and I am going to add those colors into this. Right, so let's do this. I'm going to grab these colors, these item colors, and I'll add it to my style. So this will work for what we need for now. Then I'm going to change this parent here. I'm going to grab the theme that we set up, this theme device default. I'm going to add it to the style. So we'll need to replace the app compat light dark action bar a little bit later. But for now, let's just do this. If I now go back to my style here, you'll notice my theme base will now render the colors that we chose. We're going to specify the colors as part of a resource set. So it's going to look like this: primary dark, and accent. We'll now be able to reference these colors from within our style XML file. Now there's a couple of more items pasted to this file, so I'm going to quickly step through this. First here, we're going to set up the dialog theme for a date picker. We are able to implement a style FormsAppCompatActivity dialog and specify it to be used for date pickers. So keep this in mind if you want to style your pickers as well. Then we're going to set the window translucent status to true. This is going to allow us to allow the status bar's color to shine through. And then we'll reference the colors we're going to use: color primary dark, and color accent. So if I run this now, we'll see the behavior of our application reflecting the design that we've specified. Right, so you can see these are accent colors, so that shines through. The last step is to apply the override folder values. To do this, I'm going to add another resource folder, and this is going to be a values v21 folder. In here, we're going to create a style XML file, and this will override all the styles set in it, and that applies to Android 5 and up devices. Again, this is an XML file, and I have such a file available. So inside here, you'll see that we're going to rename this or name this theme the same as what we have applied in our application. We'll still have a base class, which will refer back to the base in the style here. So it'll pick up additional item set inside this item. And then we're going to override specifics. We're going to override a background, color primary dark, and color accent. Now these are different colors. So let me show you what the effect of this is on our application. Right, so this is a complete override of the color specified earlier. You can see the colors look completely different. Being able to add material design into our Xamarin.Forms 2 applications allows us to create compelling and immersive apps. The Xamarin 4 release enhancements, such as material design support in the Xamarin.Android designer, creates a compelling workflow, making it a joy to create mobile applications. Please make sure to visit the updated documentation released as part of the Xamarin 4 update on the Xamarin Developer website for additional detailed information. Thank you very much for signing up for this lecture. I hope to see you guys in the future. Until then, best of luck with your projects and take care.